Here we are at the beginning of 2021. And what do usually people do at the beginning of the year? Well, they make New Year's resolutions. At the beginning of 2020, a lot of people made New Year's resolutions. A friend of mine told me her number one resolution was to do more travel. Well, how do you think that worked out? If we look back, whether it's last Rosh Hashanah or for sure last January 2020, New Year's resolutions, all bets are off. This has not been easy. And people have struggled on many levels. And I have to tell you, one of the number one things that people struggled with, and so many people reached out to me, was the feeling that I'm not in control. The anxiety that things are out of control. I'm here to tell you that you love not being in control. You think you don't, but you do. You love it so much, you'll pay for it. Scary movies, horror films, roller coasters, mystery novels, suspense novels. We love this feeling, what's going to happen? So what's going on in 2020? I have to tell you, I do not like the feeling of not being in control. I do not go on roller coasters. I do not go bungee jumping. I do not pay for horror films. I really don't understand the concept of these cyclone ups and down roller coasters. Why should I pay them to have that feeling? They should be paying me. And that's why I really struggled many years ago in my quest to understand, is there a God? The first of the 10 commandments is Ani Hashem, I am God. That doesn't sound much like a commandment. It kind of sounds like a statement. I am God. Don't murder, don't steal, don't commit adultery. Those are commandments. So what's the commandment? Maimonides, the Rambam from the 12th century, explains to us that the commandment, the first of the 10 commandments, is to know there is a God. To know. How do you know anything in life? How do you know your mother's your mother? How do you know you weren't adopted? How do you know your mother's your birth mother? Imagine, God forbid, you grew up in a extremely dysfunctional family. And I have to tell you that every family is dysfunctional. It's just to the degree of the dysfunction. But imagine it's like crazy, like off the charts, spooky ooky dysfunction. And parents die. And now there is a fight between the siblings suing each other over the inheritance. Your siblings are claiming that you were adopted and trying to gain some of your inheritance because of it. Crazy stuff. Now you're in court and you're on the stand. And their lawyer is telling you, prove that you were not adopted. What are you going to say? And there's a lot of money on the line. Well, some people tell me, like, I would tell them, oh, here's my birth certificate. Oh, that's right, birth certificates can never be forged. I look just like my mom, look. You know, I know somebody in Toronto who really suffered for years from infertility, and they ended up adopting a boy from Romania. This boy looked so much like her husband, you would think they were cloned. So people say this, and they told me, and there were pictures. Oh yeah, they were at the hospital when you were born, but she wasn't your birth mother. What's the evidence? Well, usually people finally come to DNA. Now we have conclusive evidence. So when I was on my journey to know there is a God, I needed evidence. Now, this is not to have faith, and this is not just to believe. This is to know. I wanted, in my quest of research and questioning, and because it's very active, knowledge is active. I wanted very much the end result, the conclusion would be there is no God. Then I could just go back to my life. I had a very good life before I came into this very serious Jewish world. I wasn't looking for anything. I wasn't lacking for anything. But how could I just walk away and pretend or decide on something so important without knowing? I grappled, I questioned. It was not simple. In the end, in my quest, my conclusion was not only that there is a God, but that God gave the Torah to the Jewish people at Mount Sinai. And if there is a God, and God gave the Torah to the Jewish people at Mount Sinai, I guess I better read it and understand what's in it. And then how do I fit into this? Where do I fit? This was not an overnight journey. And I believe that the Jewish journey is one that never ends, even at your last breath. Because we go through challenges. And even when you know something, when challenges come, either it's going to strengthen your knowledge and belief, or it's going to shatter it. The more evidence you have and constant reminders, the less you're going to be shattered, the less you're going to be weakened. But sometimes it's not that we're broken when things happen to us in life. We get cracks. And as Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks says, that when we have cracks, light can come in. Looking back at 2020, that's what happened. How did we get through it? Looking back with 2020 hindsight, how did we not just survive? My husband and I made a decision to thrive. One of the ways was to focus on Yehudim and not necessarily Bnei Yisrael. Because the Jewish people were called many things, primarily Bnei Yisrael, the children of Israel, and Yehudim. What is the etymology of all of this? Where do these names come from? Well, Bnei Yisrael, Yaakov, Jacob, he struggles with the angels. Remember Jacob's ladder? The ladder? And the angels are going up and down and he's battling. After the battle, God says, you're no longer going to be called Yaakov. You're going to be called Yisrael. And Yisrael means to struggle with God. Because he struggled with one of the angels of God. So one of the names of the Jewish people is Bnei Yisrael, the people who struggle with God. And we're also called Yehudim. That's where Jewish comes from. What's the etymology of the word Jewish? You ever with somebody on a plane, somebody not Jewish, they go, well, where does that come from? What, do you come from Jewland? You're Irish because you come from Ireland. Yehuda was one of the sons of the 12 tribes from Yaakov, from Jacob. And we're called Yehudim. The word Yehuda means to thank God. To thank God. That his mother Leah, when she had him, thanked God in a very deep way. So we're the struggle with God people, and we're the thank God people. When you're struggling with God, no matter what's going on in your life, you're being a Jew. Don't feel badly. That's being a Jew. We struggle. One of the ways that I had the clarity to get through this, and I'll bring you to Yehudim, is that my husband taught me that we have no idea why God is doing this world pandemic. Nobody can tell you this is why. You don't know why God is doing it to the world, but you can know why God is doing it to you. I can know why God is doing it to me. And that's what we need to hold on to. And we need to have not just 2020 hindsight, but 2020 clarity. When somebody says you have 2020 vision, you know, you have clarity. You can know. Not why God's doing it to the world, but why to me. What am I supposed to learn from it? But we decided to focus on Yehudim. the thank you God people. I came down one morning early on in the pandemic, and my husband said to me, when we were in quarantine, my husband said to me, there's no water. I'm like, what? He goes, I don't know. They shut off the water. There's no water. I go, there's no water? He said, Lori, if you had a choice between no Wi-Fi and no water, what would you choose? And I would say, no water. He goes, we have Wi-Fi. And that's what we decided to do through this whole experience, focusing on what we have and not what we don't have. Another thing that we focused on was the ability to listen. To listen. Every morning in Musrara, we live in a beautiful, eclectic community just outside the old city walls. And every morning at dawn, you hear the birds singing. That's how you know that the sun is coming up. The birds start singing. And a few days in to the pandemic, maybe even a few weeks, I said to my husband, listen, the birds are singing all day long. They're singing like loudly all day long. It was like we were living in a bird sanctuary. It's like we stepped back from the world, and now the birds, and we gave the world back in a more natural state without the noise and the pollution and everything that we do to the world, damaging God's beautiful world. And the birds were singing Shir to Hashem. The birds were singing praise to God. If you listen now, you could probably hear the birds. Because a couple days later, I said to my husband, maybe these birds were singing all along, but we weren't listening. Because they are singing. Why weren't we listening? Because we're running. We're running and we're doing and we're running, we're doing, and we're in control. Why did I have a hard time grappling with, is there a God? Because if there's a God, that means he's in control. Creator, sustainer, supervisor. I'm the type of person that doesn't like the feeling of not being in control. And that's why I don't go on roller coasters. That's why I don't go bungee jumping. I once went rappelling in Israel, and I remember it was like somebody's bar mitzvah tour, and I was on it, and everyone, now we're going to go rappelling. And I'm like, what? And so we put on our helmet and strapped ourselves in, like with the harness and everything. And here's this like young, like younger than my kid, Israeli guy saying to me, because you're on the edge of the cliff, and then he says, just let go. I've got you. I'm like, who are you? I'm like, what do you mean let go? I'm going to trust you? I probably 20 or 25 minutes would not let go. It was and he's just telling me, I've got you, let go. And everybody else is going. I guess it was my pride, and I just let go. And he did have me. When I realized that God ran the world, and I almost remember the moment, and I remember where I was after my grappling and my investigation, that God really ran the world, I was so relieved that I didn't have to run it anymore. Nobody likes feeling that they have no power. But when we say God has all the power, it doesn't mean you don't have the power to choose. And we're taught that God will help you in the way you want to go. You want to go this way? He'll clear the way. You want to go that way? He'll clear the way. One way is the right way, and one way is not. So years ago, I was speaking in New York, in Manhattan. We're talking years ago, before GPS, before MapQuest, before all our electronics in our phones. I remember I was speaking at the seminar, but I wanted to visit my sister who lives in Muncie, which is outside of New York. And I was trying to figure out how to make that happen. And there was like one bus, but by the time the seminar was over, I would miss that bus. And I guess somebody overheard me. And she said, listen, my husband works in Manhattan, and we live in Muncie. So why don't you, she says, I have to leave now. I couldn't leave yet. Why don't you take my car, it's parked outside, and I'll get a ride home to Muncie with my husband. And then I'll come over to your sister's and pick up the car. It was so kind and so generous of her. So I said, I have really no idea how to get to Muncie and how to get to my sister's home. So I gave her the address. She goes, oh, I know where she lives. She goes, I'll write out the directions. She wrote out directions, okay? This was when Fred Flintstone was alive. So she wrote out the directions, and I'll never forget the first line. The first line was, the car is facing in the way you want to go. Between me and my daughter, this became a little bit of an inside line. Many years later, she was going through a hard time, and she was heading to Israel. And back then, you wrote plain letters for your kids. So I wrote a plain letter for her. And the first line was, the plane is facing in the way you want to go. Momentum has been blessed with the opportunity to impact tens of thousands of homes. We bring women from all over the world, over 20,000 from 32 countries, in partnership with over 250 organizations. They go on a one-year momentum journey, which begins with a transformational 8-day experience in Israel. Project Inspire is one of our most beloved partners. And lay people in communities with Project Inspire, they reach out and they recruit Jewish mothers who are a little bit estranged from their Jewish identity in the community, and they create cohorts and they lead them on these trips. What's the number one thing that happens after 8 days in Israel on momentum? The women are facing in the way they want to go. We give them TorahAnyOne, instructions for life. Most of us grow up, and I grew up this way, so I understand that the Torah is dusty Bible stories, men in robes walking through sand dunes. There's nothing to do with my life, but has everything to do with our life. We're the people of the book, and a lot of us never read the book. There's wisdom in there to help us to succeed in the most important relationships in our life. Our marriages, our children, our own potential. But there is a foundation concept that without this, it's a book like Chaucer or Shakespeare. There's wisdom in there. But if you know there is a God, and this is God's instruction book for life, then it's a whole different ballgame. It doesn't mean we don't have choice. You can go left or you can go right. And there's probably certain points in your life, because there was in mine, where you come to that fork in the road. It takes a lot of courage to go in a way that maybe not everyone else is going, but you know that's the way. And the Almighty will help you because He has all the power. But He gave us this beautiful, beautiful gift called Bechira, free will. Free will is not just chocolate, ice cream, vanilla. I think I'll pick chocolate. Free will is making a moral choice, right from wrong. And that takes a lot of courage. The gift of 2020 was that we had to stop running and doing, and we had to start listening, not just to the birds, but to God's voice. If you heard God's voice in the clouds this morning, we probably have therapists in your city to take care of you. The Almighty does talk to us loud and clear. It actually says that God's voice breaks the cedars of Lebanon. That's how loud it is. But it's not a voice from the mountaintop or clouds. It's through Hashgacha Pratit. And momentum, we call it HP, higher power. When things happen in your life, God's talking to us. In 2020, God was on Sense Around. I always say that this year was a combination of Gilligan's Island meets the Jetsons. Gilligan's Island. Do you remember that TV show? Well, maybe I'm dating myself. I probably am. Well, you can Google it. Gilligan's Island was about a group of people who were shipwrecked on a desert island. And the whole series, and it went on for years, I don't know how many years, was them trying to get off the island. And they all different characters. Gilligan, the skipper, the movie star. We were all kind of shipwrecked, quarantined in place. We were in timeout. Why do we put our kids in timeout? We put our kids in timeout because obviously they were not behaving properly. They were not behaving at their best. We put them in timeout and we tell them to sit on that stair, you're in timeout, to think about our actions, to think about your words. And we want them to come off that stair. We want them to come out of timeout better people. What do we say when they come out of timeout? We tell them to tell their sibling who they smashed over the head with a toy truck, say you're sorry. So what do they say? Sorry. And the one who was hurt, that wasn't a real sorry, because it wasn't. We were put in timeout because obviously we were not at our best. There are things that we need to learn, and we need to come out and say sincerely that we're sorry. Come out that we're changed, that we are better people. Otherwise, this was for nothing. People say, oh, I just want to go back to the way it was. Let's just go back to normal. I just want it to be normal. You want to go back to the way it was? If we go back to the way it was, then this was for nothing. We have to emerge as better people, committed to making a better world. But it was also the Jetsons. The Jetsons was a TV show about people in the future. And one of the futuristic things on the Jetsons was that when they phoned somebody, they could actually see them on the screen. Can you imagine? And that's exactly what we have. The Talmud says that God sends the refuah before the makkah. God sends the solution even before the challenge. You think you can't get through a challenge? God gave you everything you needed before to get through it. So even though we were in timeout, and even though God decided this is who you're supposed to be shipwrecked with, these are the relationships you need to work on, He gave us all this technology so that you could FaceTime and you could WhatsApp video and you could Zoom, just like the Jetsons. But somebody told me something very heavy. A friend of mine called me up and she said, Lori, what if this is not the makkah? What if what we're going through right now is really not the challenge? What if this is the refuah? What if this, and what we've learned and grown through this experience, is to build us and build our resilience and faith and knowledge and trust and build us as people for what is really going to come? I'm not saying there has to be another world event like this, God forbid. But you're going to have challenges in your life in the future, and so am I. Through this experience, let's learn from it. Let's grow from it. Let's become greater people. Let's build our relationship with the Almighty, because there's going to be challenge ahead. Let's take all of this so that we can face those challenges. When the Almighty, when we say that He has all the power, it doesn't make us, it doesn't diminish us. It actually should lift you. Because we are limited people. We're limited. I can't do anything or everything. I can do some things. But if I can tap into God, anything is possible. You know how people say, like, what's your superpower? I have a friend, she's got an amazing superpower. She can eat anything in a restaurant and redo it at home. She can make that, whatever she knows every spice. It's a superpower. Can you imagine? She goes home and she can recreate it. What's my superpower? Well, I travel, or I used to travel all the time. I was always on a plane. I'm always in airports. Because again, momentum is an international movement. I have a superpower that I can find an electric outlet to plug in my phone or computer anywhere. I can seek out whether it's a kiosk or a bar or no matter where I am, even on planes, I can find out where that plug is. Yesterday, I wanted to go to the Kotel. I wanted to go to the Western Wall to thank the Almighty. Because my husband and I just finished getting our second vaccination. I don't want to go through forget about the politics of vaccination or how you feel or how I feel. But 1 year ago, almost to the day, I told my kids, my #1 job is to keep Abba alive. I'm here to protect your father. You call him, you learn with him, you give him that emotion and that spirit, and I'm here, I'm on it, I told them. Don't worry, because my husband's very high risk. So yesterday was not only 2 weeks since our last second shot, which means you're at that 95% efficacy. It was also 8 years to the day that my husband had open heart surgery. To be thankful that we're alive. Because being alive means potential, that anything is possible. So I wanted to go to the old city, which is about just a 15-minute walk from here. And as many of you can picture, Jaffa Gate. Like when Momentum Women come with Project Inspire, they go through Jaffa Gate. So many of us, Jaffa Gate is one of the gates to get into the old city to walk down to the Kotel, to the Western Wall. And Jaffa Gate was closed. I have never seen it closed. In the decades that I've been coming to Israel, I've never seen it closed. The gates were closed. So what did I do? I went around to another gate, and I went to Zion Gate, Shar Tzion, which I don't believe has doors that close. And I was able to get in, and I went down to the Kotel. I'm here to tell you, the gates of heaven are never closed. You can always call out to the Almighty. He has all the power, and if you tap into it, that means anything is possible. You can do anything. But what do you want, and why do you want it? God has all the power. He showed us that in 2020. There's no need to worry. There will be an end. Remember, why are we afraid of bungee jumping? Why are we not afraid of bungee jumping and scary movies and roller coasters? You pay for it because you know there's going to be an end. One of the things that is hard for us now because we don't know when this is going to end. You don't have to worry about that. It will end. God's got his plan. You can let go, and you can let God. From Jerusalem, I miss you. Israel misses you. May we all be reunited very, very soon. Well, this is the week where we commemorate Tisha B'Av, the 9th day of the Jewish month of Av. This is a very, very heavy day on the Jewish calendar. When I was growing up, never heard of it. Why? Not in Hebrew school. It's summertime, and it's about the destruction of the temple. Now, if you told me the destruction of the temple, I would think there is a synagogue that was somehow torn down. When we say the temple, we mean the Beit HaMikdash, the temple that stood in Jerusalem, where you see the Western Wall today, and you see that gold dome above it. Well, it wasn't there. We had the Beit HaMikdash. We had a place where the Kohanim, the priests, would do the service of God, where the Jewish people several times a year would come en masse and bring sacrifices and offerings, where the presence of God was strongest. That is where we kept the tablets of the Ten Commandments. That is where the whole world knew that the strength of God and His spirituality emanated from this place. And it was destroyed. It was destroyed twice. Hundreds of years apart on the same day, the 9th of Av. So this week, we also commemorate the 9th of Av. And we're taught that a generation that doesn't rebuild the temple, it's as if you destroyed it. How do we rebuild it? We're not talking about going out and buying mortars and bricks, because we know that the temple can only be rebuilt when the Jewish people are unified and we're one. Why? Because the temples were destroyed. Not because we didn't keep kosher. Not because we didn't keep Shabbat. That we're in the exile we're in now, and we don't merit to have that center because of sinat chinam, senseless hatred. And what is senseless hatred? When you hate somebody because their mistakes are different than yours. We have to look inside each person and find what it is to love about them. Because the opposite of sinat chinam, of senseless hatred, is love with a purpose. Please, this week, and on Tisha B'Av, focus. The people I'm not so happy about, the people I'm in conflict with, the place I would never walk into, think what it is to appreciate about that person or that place or that cause. Let's be the antidote. Let's be putting a brick to rebuild that temple. I'm Lori, Almost Live.